The massive crystal dome of Sanctus Station gleamed against the black void of space as 17 different species gathered for the most important vote in 3,000 years. Ambassador Velith adjusted her silver robes and reviewed the data. Pad containing everything the Alliance knew about the newcomers from Terra. The humans had been discovered only 2 years ago by a routine scouting mission, but their rapid technological advancement and complex social structures had sparked intense debate across the galaxy. Warcast Theron scales rippled with barely contained irritation as he watched the Altarian diplomat prepare her presentation. His people, the Draknari, had built their reputation on strength and honor through countless generations. The humans reminded him too much of his own species in their younger days, and that worried him deeply. He had seen their historical records, filled with endless conflicts, and wondered if the galaxy was ready for another warrior. Race. Dr. Ann Foster checked her translation device one final time as the massive doors to the council chamber opened. She had spent months learning Alliance protocols, but nothing could have prepared her for the sight before her. Crystalline beings that pulsed with inner light sat beside, insectoid creatures whose compound eyes reflected the chamber's soft glow. Aquatic species floated in specialized tanks while energy-based entities flickered between visible and invisible states. Captain David Hayes straightened his formal uniform and nodded to Colonel Tom Ridge. They had been chosen to represent humanity, not because they were perfect, but because they embodied the best of what their species could offer. Hayes had commanded peaceful exploration missions for 15 years, while Ridge had dedicated his career to defensive operations and peacekeeping. Together with Dr. Foster, they hoped to convince the Alliance that humanity deserved a place among the stars. The Speaker of the Council, an ancient Verdani whose bark-like skin held the wisdom of centuries, called the session to order. The debate began immediately as Ambassador Velith stepped forward to present the case for human inclusion. She spoke of their remarkable medical advances that could benefit all species, their clean energy solutions that surpassed anything the Alliance had developed, and their unique ability to adapt to hostile environments. The humans have shown remarkable progress in overcoming their violent past, Velith argued, her melodic voice carrying across the chamber. Their last major conflict ended 75 years ago, and since then they have focused on exploration and scientific advancement. They offer innovation that could benefit us all. Theron rose from his seat, his massive frame casting a shadow across the floor. Innovation born from conflict is dangerous innovation, he rumbled, his voice echoing off the crystal walls. These humans have spent their entire history perfecting the art of war. Now they wish to join us in peace. Can a species truly change its nature so completely? The Hiver representative, speaking through the collective consciousness of her swarm, added her concerns. The neural patterns of humans are disturbing to our kind. They resist harmony and embrace chaos. Their thoughts are shielded from us in ways we do not understand. How can we trust beings whose minds we cannot read? Captain Hayes requested permission to speak and was granted the floor. He walked to the center of the chamber, feeling the weight of countless alien eyes upon him. Honored members of the Alliance, I understand your concerns about our species. Yes, we have a history of conflict, but we also have a history of learning from our mistakes. Our wars taught us the value of peace, and our struggles taught us the importance of cooperation. He gestured to Dr. Foster, who activated a holographic display showing human achievements. We offer you medical technologies that have eliminated diseases that plagued us for millennia. We share energy solutions that could power entire worlds without environmental damage. Most importantly, we bring a perspective that embraces change and growth. The Luminary representative, a being of pure energy that communicated through light. Patterns express doubt about human compatibility with Alliance values. Your species values individual achievement over collective harmony. This creates instability in the cosmic balance we have maintained for 3,000 years. Colonel Ridge stepped forward, his military bearing evident despite his diplomatic mission. With respect, our individualism is not selfishness. It drives us to excel, to push boundaries, and to find solutions others might miss. We believe that diversity of thought strengthens any alliance just as diversity of species has strengthened yours. The debate continued for hours as each species voiced their concerns and opinions. The pelagics worried about human impact on oceanic worlds. The crystalline consortium questioned human understanding of non-carbon-based life. The wanderers remained silent, their nomadic nature making them naturally suspicious of any expansion of the alliance. Dr. Foster presented her research on human psychology, explaining how their species had evolved beyond their aggressive instincts through education and social development. She showed statistics on declining violence rates, increasing cooperation between nations, and the successful establishment of off-world colonies without territorial conflicts. We are not the same species that fought wars over resources and ideology, she explained. We have learned to channel our competitive nature into scientific research, artistic expression, and peaceful exploration. Our diversity of cultures and viewpoints has become our greatest strength. The Altarians, longtime advocates of knowledge sharing and peaceful expansion, voiced their support for human membership. Several younger species, impressed by human technological achievements, also expressed interest in collaboration. However, the older, more established civilizations remained skeptical. As the debate reached its climax, Ambassador Veleth called for the formal vote. The chamber fell silent as each species representative cast their decision. The Drachmeri, despite Theron's misgivings, voted yes after recognizing human potential. The Hivers remained opposed, their collective consciousness unable to accept individual-focused minds. The Luminari abstained, unwilling to commit to either side. The final tally was announced. 12 species voted in favor, 5 opposed, with 3 abstentions. Humanity had achieved the required two-thirds majority for provisional membership. The chamber erupted in a mixture of celebration and concern as the historic decision was recorded in Alliance archives. Captain Hayes felt relief wash over him as the speaker announced the conditions of provisional membership. Humanity would have 1 year to prove their commitment to peaceful coexistence and Alliance values. They would be monitored closely and required to report regularly on their activities and intentions. As the ceremony concluded and representatives began to disperse, several species approached the human delegation with congratulations and offers of cooperation. However, Hayes noticed the worried expressions on other faces and the whispered conversations taking place in shadowed corners of the chamber. The age of human expansion into the galaxy had begun, but the seeds of future conflict had already been planted in the doubts and fears of those who opposed their inclusion. The Alliance had voted to embrace change, but change was exactly what many species feared most. The galaxy would never be the same again. The research facility on Kepler Station hummed with activity as Dr. Ann Foster reviewed the latest experimental results. 6 months had passed since humanity joined the Alliance, and the integration process was proving more challenging than anyone had anticipated. Her team had made breakthrough discoveries in quantum field manipulation and genetic therapy, but each advance seemed to create new tensions with their alien colleagues. The Crystalline Consortium had withdrawn from 3 joint research projects in the past month, citing fundamental disagreements with human testing protocols. Foster found their concerns frustrating because every human volunteer had given informed consent, and the safety measures exceeded even Earth's strictest standards. The crystalline beings, however, viewed any form of biological experimentation as inherently wrong, regardless of the potential benefits. Colony Commander Beth Stone stood on the observation deck of New Geneva, watching construction crews work around the clock to complete the settlement's defensive perimeter. The planet sat on a contested border region where pirate attacks had become increasingly common, but her preparations had drawn criticism from neighboring species who viewed the fortifications as aggressive rather than defensive. The pelagics had filed formal complaints about human fishing operations near their water worlds, claiming that human harvesting methods disrupted the natural balance of their ecosystems. Stone had tried to explain that human techniques were designed for maximum efficiency with minimal environmental impact, But the aquatic species seemed to prioritize tradition over innovation. Trade Director Paul Grant reviewed the latest shipping manifests from his office aboard the merchant vessel Prosperity. Human traders had revolutionized cargo transport by developing more efficient routing algorithms and standardized container systems. Their ships could carry twice the cargo in half the time, making them incredibly popular with buyers but creating resentment among established trading guilds. The Wanderer trade representatives had accused humans of unfair competition, claiming that their advanced logistic systems violated the spirit of equitable commerce that had governed galactic trade for centuries. Grant found their arguments weak because humans were simply better at organizing and planning, but he understood that efficiency could be threatening to those who profited from inefficiency. Dr. Foster's communication device chimed with an urgent message from the Alliance Science Council. The Verdani had raised concerns about human agricultural techniques being used on their shared colony world of Harmony Prime. The plant-based species claimed that human crop enhancement methods produced higher yields but depleted soil nutrients in ways that would harm long-term ecological stability. She sighed and prepared another detailed report explaining human farming practices. The genetically modified crops were designed to actually improve soil health while producing more food. But the Verdani seemed unable to accept that artificial enhancement could be superior to natural growth. Their symbiotic relationship with plant life made them instinctively suspicious of any technology that modified growing organisms. Ambassador Veloth received another diplomatic protest in her quarters on Sanctus Station. The Hiver Collective had become increasingly agitated by human neural patterns, claiming that proximity to human settlements was disrupting their collective consciousness. The insectoid species functioned as a unified mind, and human thoughts apparently created interference that caused them physical discomfort. The problem was that humans could not change their brain patterns any more than the Hivers could abandon their collective consciousness. The two species were fundamentally incompatible on a neurological level, which made cooperation nearly impossible. Veloth had tried to mediate by suggesting separate working environments, but the Hivers viewed this as segregation rather than accommodation. Colonel Tom Ridge monitored security reports from his headquarters on Earth's moon base. Human expansion had proceeded rapidly, with new colonies established on 7 different worlds in just 6 months. The speed of human settlement impressed some species but alarmed others who preferred the slow, deliberate pace of traditional alliance expansion. Each new human colony represented a potential flashpoint for conflict. The humans brought advanced technology and efficient organization, but they also brought cultural practices that clashed with local customs. Their emphasis on individual achievement and competitive improvement seemed to threaten the cooperative spirit that had maintained galactic peace for millennia. The Luminari had begun avoiding human-controlled space entirely, claiming that human energy signatures disrupted their delicate electromagnetic balance. The energy-based beings communicated through complex light patterns that were apparently distorted by human electronic devices. No technological solution had been found to resolve this interference. Captain David Hayes read the latest intelligence reports from his command ship orbiting Terra. Pirate attacks on human shipping had increased by 300% since joining the Alliance, suggesting that criminal organizations viewed humans as easy targets. The reality was proving quite different, as human merchant vessels were well-armed and their crews trained in defensive tactics. The most recent incident had occurred near the Draknari border, where pirates had attacked a human cargo convoy. The human response had been swift and overwhelming, with the entire pirate fleet destroyed in less than 20 minutes. The efficiency of human military action had impressed the Draknari but horrified other species who expected prolonged negotiations before any use of force. Dr. Foster's research into Alliance biology had revealed disturbing patterns in how different species interacted with human presence. The telepathic races reported headaches and confusion when near humans, while empathic species described feeling emotionally unstable around human settlements. It was as if human consciousness naturally interfered with the subtle mental connections that many Alliance species took for granted. the Altarians had requested detailed studies of human psychological profiles, hoping to understand why their species seemed so disruptive to galactic harmony. Foster's preliminary findings suggested that humans possessed unusual neural shielding that blocked telepathic influence, but she had not yet grasped the full implications of this discovery. Trade negotiations had become increasingly difficult as human efficiency drove down prices and increased competition. The consortium of merchant guilds had demanded that humans limit their trade operations to avoid disrupting established economic relationships. Grant had refused, arguing that free competition benefited consumers and encouraged innovation. The economic disruption was spreading beyond trade to manufacturing and technology development. Human innovations were advancing alliance capabilities by decades, but they were also making older technologies obsolete. Species that had built their economies around traditional manufacturing were struggling to adapt to rapid technological change. Colony Commander Stone received reports of increasing tensions between human settlers and the wanderer tribes who claimed ancestral rights to several worlds. The nomadic species had never established permanent settlements, but they considered certain planets sacred and visited them during specific seasonal cycles. Human colonists saw empty worlds ripe for development, while the wanderers saw invasion of their spiritual homeland. The Alliance Council had scheduled emergency sessions to address growing complaints about human behavior, but no clear solutions had emerged. The problems were not caused by human malice or aggression, but by fundamental differences in how humans approached problem-solving and social organization. As the 6th month of human membership concluded, it became clear that the integration process was failing. The species that had voted for human inclusion were beginning to question their decision, while those who had opposed it felt vindicated in their concerns. The galaxy was changing faster than anyone had anticipated, and not everyone was comfortable with the direction of that change. The stage was set for the first major crisis of human membership, and the ancient peace of the Alliance was beginning to crack under the pressure of human innovation and efficiency. The next test would determine whether humanity could find a place in the galactic community or whether their presence would shatter the harmony that had lasted for 3,000 years. The Geological Survey report landed on Mining Director Paul Grant's desk like a bomb waiting to explode. The mineral deposits beneath the sacred grove on Kepler 7 contained enough rare Earth elements to power the entire Alliance for a century. The quantum crystals alone could revolutionize faster-than-light travel, while the exotic metals would enable new forms of energy generation that could solve the power crisis affecting 12 different worlds. Grant stared at the holographic display, showing the underground formations. The deposits were massive, easily the largest discovery in Alliance history. The only problem was their location directly beneath the ceremonial grounds that the wanderer tribes had visited for over 2,000 years. The nomadic species had never claimed ownership of the planet, but they considered the site sacred to their ancestors. Wanderer speaker Lorraine stood in the ancient grove, her weathered hands touching the bark of trees that had witnessed countless generations of her people. The seasonal pilgrimage brought the scattered tribes together for ritual ceremonies that connected them to their spiritual heritage. The thought of mining machinery destroying this sacred space filled her with a cold rage that surprised her with its intensity. The humans had been respectful during initial negotiations, offering to relocate the ceremonies to a similar grove on a nearby continent. They had even proposed building a memorial to honor wanderer traditions. But they could not understand that the sanctity of the place came from the bones of ancestors buried in the soil, not from the trees that grew above them. Ambassador Susan Park arrived on Kepler 7 hoping to mediate a peaceful resolution. The diplomatic crisis had erupted suddenly when the mineral survey results became public knowledge. 12 Alliance species had expressed interest in sharing the mining rights, while environmental groups demanded complete preservation of the site. The economic implications were staggering, but the cultural significance to the wanderers could not be ignored. The emergency session of the Alliance Council had devolved into chaos as species took sides based on their own interests. The Drachnary supported human development rights, seeing opportunity in the changing balance of power. The Crystalline Consortium backed the Wanderers, their symbiotic relationship with mineral formations making them sensitive to large-scale extraction. The Altarians called for compromise, while the Hivers demanded that human expansion be halted entirely. Dr. Ann Foster studied the geological data with growing excitement and concern. The quantum crystals could enable instantaneous communication across the galaxy, while the exotic metals might allow for artificial gravity generation and improved ship armor. The scientific applications were limitless, but she understood that the discovery had created a political crisis that threatened to tear the Alliance apart. Grant authorized preliminary excavation after waiting 3 weeks for the Alliance mediation process to produce results. The human position was straightforward. They had followed all legal procedures for claiming mineral rights on an uninhabited world. The Wanderers had never established permanent settlements or filed territorial claims, making their objections legally meaningless under Alliance law. The first mining crews arrived at dawn, their equipment designed to minimize environmental impact, while maximizing extraction efficiency. The excavation would be completed in stages, with careful preservation of surface features and full restoration of the area after mining operations concluded. Grant had even hired Verdane specialists to ensure that the replanted vegetation would thrive in the restored soil. Speaker Lyraine watched the human machines begin their work with tears streaming down her face. The legal arguments meant nothing to her people, who measured ownership in generations rather than documents. The sacred grove had been blessed by the rituals of countless ancestors, and its destruction would sever the spiritual connection that bound the scattered tribes together. The first act of sabotage occurred during the night shift when explosive charges destroyed 3 excavation units. The Wanderer militants had used traditional weapons enhanced with modern technology, creating a devastating attack that killed 3 human workers and injured 7 others. The precision of the assault suggested careful planning and detailed knowledge of human mining operations. Colonel Tom Ridge arrived on Kepler-7 with a full security detachment within hours of the attack. His investigation revealed that the sabotage had been carried out by a radical faction of Wanderers, who rejected their leadership's attempts at peaceful negotiation. The militants had declared that they would die before allowing the sacred grove to be desecrated by human greed. The Alliance Council demanded an immediate ceasefire and withdrawal of human forces, but Grant refused to abandon the mining operation. Too much was at stake economically, and the legal precedent would affect human expansion throughout the galaxy. If nomadic species could claim sacred rights to any world they had visited, human colonization would become impossible. The second attack came 3 days later when Wanderer raiders struck the main mining compound. The assault was repelled by human security forces, but not before 5 more workers were killed and critical equipment was destroyed. The raiders had used advanced weapons that could only have been supplied by other Alliance species, suggesting that the conflict was expanding beyond the Wanderers themselves. Ridge implemented martial law across the mining zone, establishing a perimeter that excluded all non-human personnel. The security measures were necessary to protect human workers, but they also prevented Alliance mediators from accessing the site. The isolation of the mining operation was seen as evidence of human aggression by species that had initially supported the development project. Dr. Foster's analysis of the mineral samples revealed properties that exceeded even the most optimistic projections. The quantum crystals could enable faster-than-light communication networks that would connect the entire galaxy in real time. The exotic metals showed potential for applications in medicine, energy generation, and space travel that could transform civilization itself. The scientific implications convinced several wavering species to support the human position. The Altarians, despite their commitment to peaceful mediation, recognized that the mineral deposits could solve many of the Alliance's most pressing problems. The Pelagics, initially neutral, began to support mining operations after learning that the exotic metals could enable underwater cities on their water worlds. Speaker Lyraine's appeals to the Alliance Council became increasingly desperate as the mining operation expanded. The human machines worked around the clock, stripping away layers of soil that contained the remains of her ancestors. The sacred grove was being systematically destroyed, and the spiritual heart of her people was being torn out for the sake of human profit. The third attack targeted human civilian settlements on Kepler-7, with Wanderer militants bombing a residential complex that housed mining families. The assault killed 12 people, including 4 children, and wounded dozens more. The attack on non-combatants marked a significant escalation in the conflict and hardened human attitudes toward negotiation. Grant authorized full-scale military protection for the mining operation, bringing in heavy weapons and combat troops to defend the site. The transformation of the mining complex into a military fortress was seen as provocation by the Wanderers, who viewed it as evidence that humans had never intended to negotiate in good faith. The Alliance Council's emergency session devolved into open hostility as species accused each other of supporting terrorism or cultural genocide. The Draknari openly praised human military efficiency, while the Hivers condemned human aggression as proof that they were unfit for Alliance membership. The careful diplomatic balance that had maintained galactic peace for 3,000 years was crumbling under the pressure of competing interests. Ambassador Park's final mediation attempt failed when neither side would accept compromise. The humans demanded complete access to the mineral deposits with compensation for the Wanderers, while the Wanderers insisted on total preservation of the sacred grove. The gap between the positions was unbridgeable, and the Alliance lacked the authority to impose a solution on unwilling parties. The first space battle in Alliance history began when Wanderer allies attacked human supply ships attempting to reach Kepler-7. The assault was coordinated by species that had remained officially neutral while secretly supporting the Wanderer cause. The attack marked the end of diplomatic solutions and the beginning of military conflict that would reshape the galaxy. The ancient peace of the Alliance was shattered by the discovery of valuable minerals beneath a sacred grove, but the real cause of the conflict was deeper than economics or religion. The galaxy was learning that human presence changed fundamental assumptions about cooperation, compromise, and the balance of power that had maintained stability for millennia. The age of harmony was ending, and the age of competition was about to begin. The battle for Kepler-7 had spread across 3 star systems as allied species chose sides in the First Galactic War in over a millennium. Admiral Lisa Cross commanded the human fleet from her flagship Defiance, watching tactical displays that showed the complex web of alliances and betrayals that had shattered the ancient peace. The Hivers had joined the Wanderers, their collective consciousness viewing human individualism as a disease that threatened cosmic harmony. The insectoid swarm ships moved with perfect coordination, their telepathic link allowing instantaneous communication and flawless tactical execution. Against any other species, the Hiver fleet would have been invincible, but human tactics were proving surprisingly effective. Cross had discovered that the collective consciousness made the Hivers predictable, their shared mind preventing the creative chaos that defined human military doctrine. Warcast. Theron led the Draknari fleet in support of the human position, his massive dreadnoughts forming a protective screen around the mining colonies. The reptilian warriors had found kindred spirits in the humans, recognizing the same competitive drive that had built the Draknari Empire centuries earlier. Their alliance was based on mutual respect for strength and the understanding that conflict was sometimes necessary for progress. The Altarians had abandoned their traditional neutrality to support the Wanderer cause, their scholarly nature making them sympathetic to the preservation of cultural heritage. Ambassador Veleth coordinated the diplomatic efforts to restore peace, but her attempts at mediation were undermined by the escalating violence and the growing realization that the conflict was about more than mining rights. Dr. Ann Foster worked frantically in her laboratory aboard the research vessel Discovery, analyzing data that could change everything. Her xenological studies had revealed something disturbing about the nature of Alliance peace, something that explained why human presence had been so disruptive to galactic harmony. The neural patterns she had been studying suggested that the 3,000-year peace had not been natural. The Luminari had withdrawn from Alliance space entirely, their energy-based consciousness unable to tolerate the chaotic emanations generated by human minds. Their departure had created a power vacuum that other species rushed to fill, but it had also eliminated one of the key factors that had maintained galactic stability for millennia. Cross adapted her battle tactics in real time as the conflict expanded. Human ships were outnumbered 3-1, but their crews demonstrated an ability to innovate under pressure that their enemies could not match. New weapon systems were developed during combat. Defensive strategies were modified based on enemy responses, and entire battle plans were rewritten between engagements. The willingness of humans to accept casualties in pursuit of victory shocked species accustomed to ritualized warfare with minimal losses. The pelagics had withdrawn from the conflict after watching human ships ram enemy vessels in suicidal attacks that achieved strategic objectives. The aquatic species could not understand a mentality that valued mission success over individual survival. Foster's breakthrough came when she analyzed the neural interaction patterns between different Alliance species. The telepathic races had been unconsciously influencing the thoughts and decisions of non-telepathic species for thousands of years, creating a subtle form of mental manipulation that maintained peaceful cooperation. The Luminari had provided the energy matrix that amplified these effects, while the Hivers had used their collective consciousness to harmonize conflicting viewpoints. The revelation that Alliance peace had been artificially maintained through psychic manipulation sent shockwaves through the galactic community. Species that had believed themselves to be making free choices discovered that their decisions had been subtly influenced by telepathic pressure. The anger and betrayal felt by these species further destabilized the political situation. Humans were naturally immune to telepathic influence due to their unique neural structure, which had evolved through millions of years of intraspecies conflict. The constant warfare in human history had created evolutionary pressure for mental shielding that protected against psychic attack. This immunity made humans natural disruptors of the artificial harmony that had suppressed galactic ambition and competition. The Battle of Nexus Corridor became the turning point of the war when human and Drachnary forces faced the combined Hiver Wanderer fleet in the largest space battle in recorded history. Cross employed a strategy that no other species would have considered, using civilian ships as decoys while her main battle fleet attacked from an unexpected direction. The human tactic of using non-combatants as bait horrified the enemy commanders, who could not bring themselves to fire on civilian vessels. The moral constraints that had limited warfare for millennia were meaningless to humans who viewed victory as the ultimate goal. The Hiver fleet hesitated for crucial seconds, allowing the human attack to achieve total surprise. Theron's dreadnoughts smashed through the enemy formation with devastating effect. Their weapon systems enhanced by human targeting computers that improved accuracy by 40%. The Drachnary had embraced human military technology, creating a hybrid fighting force that combined reptilian aggression with human innovation. The combined assault shattered the Hiver collective consciousness, the destruction of their command ships creating feedback loops that disabled the entire fleet. The Wanderer allies, deprived of their insectoid coordination, found themselves facing superior firepower and tactical flexibility. The battle ended with the complete destruction of the anti-human coalition and the establishment of human dominance. In the contested region, Foster's analysis revealed that the collapse of the telepathic influence network had freed species from mental constraints that had suppressed their natural ambitions for 3,000 years. Ancient rivalries and territorial disputes that had been dormant suddenly erupted as species rediscovered their individual interests and desires. The Altarian coalition, fragmented as member species, pursued their own agendas without the telepathic pressure that had maintained unity. The Crystalline Consortium began aggressive expansion into territory that had been neutral for centuries. The Verdani started claiming worlds based on the presence of plant life, while the Pelagics demanded exclusive rights to all water worlds. The Galactic Harmony Alliance officially dissolved when the remaining member species could no longer agree on basic principles of cooperation. The treaty that had maintained peace for 3 millennia was declared null and void, leaving the galaxy without any central authority or conflict resolution mechanism. Cross received new orders to establish human protectorates around key mining worlds and trade routes. The collapse of Alliance authority had created opportunities for expansion that humanity was prepared to exploit. The human military had proven itself capable of defeating any opponent, and the political chaos provided justification for protective intervention. The War Crimes Tribunal that had been established to investigate the conflict collapsed when it became clear that the concept of war crimes was culturally relative. Actions that horrified some species were considered normal military procedure by others. The legal framework that had governed civilized warfare was based on assumptions that no longer applied in the post-alliance galaxy. Foster's final report concluded that the age of artificial peace had ended permanently. The telepathic influence network could not be restored because too many species now understood how it worked and actively resisted its effects. The galaxy would have to find new ways to maintain stability based on mutual interest rather than psychic manipulation. The revelation that humans had evolved immunity to telepathic control through evolutionary pressure created by constant warfare sparked intense debate about the nature of peace and progress. Some species viewed human history as a cautionary tale about the dangers of uncontrolled aggression, while others saw it as evidence that conflict was necessary for development and strength. The new reality was that the galaxy had been liberated from artificial constraints, but the price of freedom was the end of guaranteed peace. Species would now have to actively choose cooperation over conflict, and those choices would be based on genuine self-interest rather than telepathic manipulation. The age of human expansion had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. The ruins of Sanctus Station drifted silently through space, its crystal dome shattered by the final battle that had ended the Galactic Harmony Alliance. Admiral David Hayes stood in the command center of New Geneva, the human capital world that had become the de facto center of galactic politics. The view from his office showed construction crews building the infrastructure of a new civilization, one based on competition and choice rather than enforced harmony. The galaxy had reorganized itself into competing power blocks after the collapse of the Alliance. The human Drachnary Consortium controlled the most valuable mining worlds and trade routes, their combined military forces ensuring that no other faction could challenge their dominance. The partnership between the two species had proven surprisingly stable, with human innovation complementing Drachnary's strength to create a formidable alliance. Speaker Lyrain led the Independent Worlds Coalition, a loose confederation of species that had chosen neutrality over alignment with any major power. The Wanderers had become the voice of smaller civilizations that feared domination by the galactic superpowers. Their coalition provided a buffer zone between the competing blocks and served as a refuge for species that preferred traditional ways of life. The Altarian Knowledge Preserve had emerged as a center of learning and diplomacy, with Ambassador Veloth working to maintain communication channels between the hostile factions. The scholarly species had abandoned their military ambitions to focus on preserving culture and knowledge during the chaotic transition period. Their neutral status made them valuable mediators in the new galactic order. Dr. Ann Foster's research facility on Terra Prime had become the most important scientific institution in the galaxy. Her work on telepathic immunity had led to breakthroughs in neural shielding technology that allowed other species to resist psychic manipulation. The liberation of minds from artificial influence had accelerated scientific progress throughout the galaxy. The Hiver Collective had retreated to their core worlds, their damaged consciousness slowly rebuilding itself in isolation. The destruction of their fleet had severed connections between different swarm units, forcing them to rediscover individuality within their collective structure. Some observers believe that the Hivers might emerge from their recovery stronger and more adaptable than before. Trade had flourished in the new, competitive environment as species pursued economic opportunities that had been suppressed under the Alliance system. The removal of artificial constraints had unleashed entrepreneurial energy that drove innovation and wealth creation across the galaxy. Human merchant fleets connected distant worlds in trading networks that spanned entire sectors. The Crystalline Consortium had become a major player in the galactic economy, their unique mineral-based technology complementing human industrial capabilities. The partnership between carbon-based and silicon-based intelligence had produced hybrid technologies that neither species could have developed alone. Their crystal computer networks enabled faster-than-light communication that connected the scattered civilizations. Military technology had advanced by centuries. In just 2 years, as the competitive pressure of potential conflict drove rapid innovation, human weapon systems had been adapted by allied species, while enemy technologies had been reverse-engineered to create new defensive capabilities. The arms race had made war more deadly but also more expensive, creating incentives for diplomatic solutions. Hayes reviewed the latest intelligence reports from across the galaxy. The Luminari had established a new energy-based civilization in the galactic core, their collective consciousness expanded and purified by isolation from chaotic human thoughts. Their advanced technology remained mysterious, but trading contracts suggested they were developing capabilities that could reshape the balance of power, the Pelagics had claimed. Exclusive rights to all water worlds, using their aquatic advantages to establish underwater cities that were impossible for other species to attack. Their isolation had made them increasingly conservative, but their control of water resources gave them significant leverage in negotiations with dry world civilizations. Foster's latest breakthrough had revealed the true extent of human neural evolution. The immunity to telepathic influence was just one aspect of a broader mental adaptation that made humans naturally resistant to all forms of consciousness manipulation. This trait had been developed through millions of years of intraspecies conflict, where survival had depended on maintaining mental independence. The discovery that human evolutionary history had been shaped by constant warfare had profound implications for galactic politics. Other species began to understand that human aggression was not a character flaw, but an adaptation that had produced a mentally superior life form. The fear that had initially greeted human expansion was being replaced by respect for human capabilities. The Terran Accords were signed on the anniversary of the Alliance's dissolution, establishing new principles for galactic governance based on voluntary cooperation rather than enforced harmony. The agreement recognized that lasting peace required genuine choice and mutual benefit rather than artificial manipulation. Each species would be free to pursue its own interests within agreed-upon boundaries. The new framework acknowledged that conflict was a natural part of galactic politics but established rules for limiting its destructive potential. Wars would be fought with specific objectives and clear victory conditions, preventing the total destruction that had characterized primitive warfare. The Accords also guaranteed the rights of neutral species and established protected zones for cultural preservation. Hayes addressed the galactic community from the rebuilt chambers of New Geneva, his words broadcast to every inhabited world. He acknowledged that human admission to the Alliance had ended the age of artificial peace, but argued that the new era of genuine choice was superior to the mental slavery that had disguised itself as harmony. The galaxy was now free to pursue its own destiny without telepathic manipulation controlling every decision. The economic prosperity that followed the collapse of artificial constraints had exceeded all projections. Species that had been held back by telepathic pressure were now exploring their full potential, developing technologies and social systems that had been impossible under the old regime. The competitive environment had driven innovation at a pace that would have been unthinkable during the stagnant Alliance period. Education systems across the galaxy had been revolutionized by human teaching methods that emphasized critical thinking and individual achievement. The old model of collective learning had given way to personalized instruction that developed each student's unique capabilities. Young beings from dozens of species were learning to question authority and think independently for the first time in their civilization's histories. The cultural renaissance that accompanied political liberation had produced an explosion of art, literature, and philosophy as species rediscovered their individual voices. The homogenizing influence of telepathic harmony had suppressed creative expression for millennia, but the new freedom had unleashed artistic movements that celebrated diversity and innovation. Colony Director Beth Stone supervised the construction of humanity's 100th world, a testament to the rapid expansion that had followed the establishment of the new galactic order. Human settlement techniques had been adopted by allied species, enabling the development of worlds that had been considered uninhabitable under the old system. The pioneer spirit that drove human expansion was inspiring other civilizations to push their own boundaries. The medical advances developed by Dr. Foster's research teams had eliminated diseases that had plagued multiple species for generations. The combination of human biological knowledge and alien physiological understanding had produced treatments that were effective across different evolutionary lineages. The collaborative research networks established after the war had accelerated scientific progress beyond anything achieved during the Alliance period. Military academies on dozens of worlds now taught human tactical doctrine as the new standard for effective warfare. The principles of adaptive strategy and acceptable losses had revolutionized military thinking throughout the galaxy. However, the improved capabilities of all forces had also made potential conflicts more dangerous, creating strong incentives for diplomatic solutions. The Draknari homeworld had become a center of military technology development, with human engineers working alongside reptilian weapons specialists to create defensive systems that protected the consortium's interests. The partnership had proven that different species could maintain their distinct cultures while cooperating for mutual benefit. Transport networks established by human logistics companies had connected previously isolated worlds to the galactic economy. The efficiency improvements had reduced shipping costs by 70%, while increasing delivery speeds by orders of magnitude. Remote colonies that had struggled to survive under the Alliance were now thriving commercial centers. The establishment of the Galactic Stock Exchange on New Geneva had created investment opportunities that allowed species to share in the prosperity generated by expansion and innovation. The financial instruments developed by human economists had enabled project funding on a scale that would have been impossible under the resource allocation systems of the old Alliance. Archaeological expeditions to former Alliance worlds had uncovered evidence of the telepathic influence networks that had maintained artificial peace. The discovery of psychic amplification devices, hidden on hundreds of planets, had confirmed Foster's theories about mental manipulation. The removal of these devices had been followed by immediate changes in local political dynamics. Research into human evolutionary history had revealed that Earth's violent past had been essential for developing the mental independence that made humans immune to telepathic control. The constant warfare had created selection pressure for individuals who could resist mental influence, eventually producing a species that was naturally immune to consciousness manipulation. The realization that human aggression was actually an evolutionary advantage had changed how other species viewed human behavior. Actions that had been criticized as unnecessarily violent were now understood as necessary adaptations for mental freedom. The galaxy was learning to appreciate the benefits of controlled conflict and competitive pressure. Youth exchange programs between human worlds and allied species had created the first generation of beings educated in the principles of individual achievement and mental independence. These young people were returning to their homeworlds with ideas and attitudes that challenged traditional authority structures and collective decision-making processes. The technological singularity that many observers had predicted was beginning to manifest as the combination of human innovation and alien capabilities produced breakthroughs that transcended the limitations of individual species. Hybrid technologies that merged different evolutionary approaches were opening possibilities that no single civilization could have achieved alone. The final session of the Terran Accords established the Galactic Development Bank, an institution that would fund expansion and innovation projects throughout the galaxy. The bank's policies favored competitive bidding and performance-based funding, ensuring that resources went to the most capable organizations rather than traditional power structures. Hayes concluded his address by acknowledging that the price of freedom was eternal vigilance, but argued that the benefits of genuine choice outweighed the costs of potential conflict. The galaxy had traded guaranteed peace for the opportunity to reach its full potential, and early results suggested that the exchange had been worthwhile. Children from a dozen different species played together in the parks of New Geneva, their games reflecting the competitive but cooperative spirit of the new galactic order. They were learning that peace was not a natural state, but something that had to be actively chosen and constantly maintained through strength, wisdom, and mutual respect. The age of artificial harmony had ended forever, but the age of genuine cooperation was just beginning. The galaxy had discovered that true peace could only exist when it was chosen freely rather than imposed through mental manipulation. The future would be more dangerous but also more dynamic, offering possibilities that had been unthinkable during the long stagnation of the Alliance period. The human experiment in galactic politics had succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, proving that sometimes the greatest gift a species could offer was the destruction of comfortable illusions. The galaxy was now free to pursue its own destiny, and that freedom was the most valuable legacy of humanity's admission to the stars.